Hello, I'm Rebecca Swansbury, Deputy Director of Education for the Diocese of Canterbury, and this short video is to help school leaders and governors prepare for their SIAMS inspection. This is just taken from some wisdom I've gleaned over the past few months through my own training and through inspections I've carried out. I do hope this video will be helpful to you as I reflect on things that I've picked up. Do come back to me though if you've got any questions at any point. Part one of this video is going to be preparation before your inspection, things that you might be doing now and could be just tightening and tweaking as you go through. The second part is actually about inspection day once you get that initial phone call from the National SIAMS team and some things to think about to really celebrate and show your school off. You've all been to training with me on your vision and how it needs to be theologically rooted and needs to reflect your context and who you are. You know all of that stuff, but what I'm talking about now is how is everything you have in your school cohesive? Is there a streamlined flow from your vision, through your values, through your theological rootedness, through your policies? I go into some schools where they have so many different words. There are learning values, Christian values, there's a behaviour charter, there's we do this for this day and we do this for that and the vision shapes us through this and we've got this Bible verse and this Bible verse. So confusing. People get really confused about which bit is it you're talking about. My top tip really is to keep it as simple as you can. Keep your values short and sweet. How can your behaviour values or your behaviour rules flow from your values? Could they be the same thing? I know many of you are going for 3 rules, be safe, be ready, be kind, or something like that. How could they be similar, or how could you have 3 of each, for example? There's no rules here. I'm not telling you you have to do it like this. But all I'm saying to you is the more streamlined and the simpler it is, the easier it is for everybody to remember what it is you're talking about. So you need one clear vision that says who you are, 50 plus words, 75-ish probably maximum, that sets out who you are. How then is that theologically rooted? How is all you do and all you are rooted in that theology? How do your values then help you live that vision out? And how does all of that then shape your policy and practice in school? Keep it simple. Keep it cohesive, and it should be this golden thread that flows through everything you do. You should see your vision come to life through every policy and practice. It shouldn't be complicated or confused with millions of different Bible verses or references. Keep it simple, keep it clear, keep it cohesive and flowing from your vision into everything that you do. Following on from that, theological rootedness. How is it articulated? How is it described by all? And can it be articulated by everybody? I don't mean kind of a recitation of the actual Bible story, which is, telling me all about it, retelling it. Actually, what I'm talking about is, can you describe how, for example, the feeding of the 5,000 shapes how we behave, the actions that we make, the decisions that we have? For example, we raise up leaders of all levels to make decisions, to have autonomy, to be independent, just like Jesus did. Jesus said to his disciples when they told him that the people were hungry, go and sort it. Go and make a plan. You can do this. I trust you. When the child came with that food, Jesus said, come on, okay, thank you. Let's see how we can use this. How does the story speak into all that you do? So because of our vision, because of our theological rootedness, this is why we feed our children all the time. We buy into the National Breakfast Scheme and we buy bagels, we heat them, we feed everybody. There's no stigma, everybody is fed because we believe that we need to spend our money like that. Now that's just an example from one parable. You've all got your own verses, your own theological rootedness. But how are you using the language and the understanding of that narrative to speak into all that you do? And can everybody speak like that? It shouldn't just be for leaders to articulate it in that way. Can the children in their own way? Can the governors in their own way? Can parents potentially and wider community speak of the kind of essence of who you are as a school because of your theological rootedness? Your school development plan is a really important document for you as leaders as it guides your thinking and shapes the development for the coming year. But how does it sing of your vision? Does it say you are a church school by looking at it? Again, there is no right or wrong way of putting one together. You will all have your own points and areas for development that will be different in every single school. However, you are a church school, and is there something within your plan that says you are? Maybe you've got a whole column, a whole strand that is church distinctiveness. Maybe you've got things flowing through all of your priorities. If you're thinking about oracy or vocabulary, how is that then fed into collective worship, RE, into other areas? How are you constantly singing that you are a church school and your vision in action through all that you do, through all development points? Now, what I'm not saying is that at every development point there needs to be a Christian distinctiveness point. I'm not saying that, but it should be clear from your development plan that developing yourself as an effective church school should be a priority. And so therefore there should be an element of it within your plan somewhere. Governors, at this point, I just want to say thank you for the time that you give as a willing volunteer to serve your school and this body. Thank you for the time you spend monitoring, visiting the school, writing up reports, reading papers. It's endless, but we are really grateful and you are a really treasured part of our school community. So on inspection day, are you going to be able to answer the questions the inspector asks you? Here's some examples of some that you might be asked. Can you give me some examples of the vision in action? Where have you used the theological rootedness to shape decisions and guide your thinking? Are you able to tell me how effective you are as a church school? What monitoring have you done that tells me that you are effective? How do you know? Are you living out your original trust deed, that foundation that was put in place when the school was opened? Are you able to describe all of that? I'm sure you are, but if you need any help, do get in touch. But it's really important that you understand the role that you play each day, but also on inspection day, in sharing how effective you are as a church school. I've spoken a lot about websites before, but is it obvious that you are a Church of England school? Does it sing, we are a church school, we're really proud of it, we're not going to be apologetic about it? Is there your RE and collective worship policy on there? Do you put things about worship and RE and other things about your wider school life on there? And it might be that these actually are on social media now rather than your website. But I think it's about what do you value, what's important to you, because what is important is what you'll put out. So just have a think about that. Also, you might want to have a little check every now and again about information that might be out of date, because you'll be surprised how deep an inspector will go into your website, and it might prove that actually there are questions they need answering from some of the information that's on your website. So again, a bit like I said earlier, keep it clear, keep it simple, and keep it cohesive, and that it really sings you are a church school and your vision is who you are and it drives everything that you do. Just a reminder about self-evaluation. Self-evaluation is something that good leaders do all the time. Where are we now? What are we going to do to move forward? And that is something that I know you will be doing as leaders all the time. How you choose to record that in terms of SIAMS is up to you. The Church of England have put together some templates that you might want to use, but you don't have to. But again, like everything I've said already, keep it clear, keep it simple, keep it cohesive, and keep it flowing from your vision. It's also really important that it's impact focused. You could end up with the questions that you're being asked, literally just writing a narrative document, sort of spilling out everything that you do in school. And that's really great. It's really helpful to an inspector and everybody else because it's a good record and a reminder of all the amazing things that you do. However, What we really want to know is the impact of those things. Now, impact is hard to write, I appreciate that, and quite a lot of the impact will be seen on the day in school. But this is your opportunity to lay out things that you do and the impact you are having, because it's one day, one inspector, and there are so many things to see and do on the day. Why not give them information before they come that sets out the impact you are having on the children and the families and staff in your school? So keep it clear, keep it simple, keep it concise. Don't make it too long, but also keep it impact focused. The first section, the who are you and why are you here, is just a lot of questions, and you're going to be asked about those on the inspection phone call. Please don't feel that you've got to spend hours answering those questions on that piece of paper. They are just there as a guide, and you might want to put some bullet points down to give you some prompts, but please don't feel you've got to spend hours typing that into a format that's going to be sent to the inspector. Those bits are for you to think about what you want to say to the inspector during the phone call. Spiritual flourishing is something, again, we've talked about a lot, and Natalie will be running some training on that in the new academic year. But really it talks about spiritual flourishing. Do you as a school understand what we mean by spiritual? Remember, it's not limited to one religion. It's deeply personal, it's unique, and it's often really hard to articulate. But where are those moments of awe and wonder, of ow, of wow, where children are given opportunities to experience something greater than themselves and be part of something really quite special and deeply unique? Somebody said that spirituality is where, or a moment of spirituality is where it leaves an imprint on you that's never forgotten. Now, obviously, we're talking about small things and big things, and some of those littler things might get lost as we grow older, but they all form part of who we are. Really, when we're talking about spirituality, it's your inner being. You are born as a spiritual being, and that again is not linked to a religion or a faith. So therefore, that deep intrinsic spirituality is going to flow through every area of school life. It's going to ripple into curriculum, into the playground, into forest school, into trips, into worship, into RE, into the day-to-day interactions you have in school and out of school. It could be planned for, could be spontaneous. But actually, we're not talking about a separate box. This is a spiritual moment in a box, or we're going to do a spiritual moment now. What we're talking about is a life that is spiritual, where children are curious and open to asking those questions, exploring, and just tapping into the wonder of creation and the wonder of things, music and arts and literature and maths problems that are solved and texts and reading, all of those wonderful rich things that you place in front of those children each day. How can we be spiritual, and how can we flourish together through that? So is there a shared understanding, and does that spirituality ripple through everything that you do in school? Courageous advocacy is where you give that voice to the voiceless. How are your children leading on this? Now, what I've come to reflect on is that this has to start organically. It needs to start with maybe something in worship or curriculum, or something where you turn your eyes outward, maybe to your local community, maybe to something happening not too far away. But what I've experienced recently is where pupils particularly tap into their local because of something that's happened in school. So if you get your culture right in school, a culture of justice, of standing up for the right thing, for speaking out, for asking questions and for challenging things inward in a safe way, children will naturally turn outward and they'll start looking at the local. Sometimes I think schools jump too far into national and global. Start locally, start organically, and it will grow. If children see that there is litter in the streets around their school, and you as a school encourage them to go and pick it up with the right equipment and with adults and in all the proper ways that you would do that, When they then go wider, they might then start to think, right, well, I've made a difference here. How could I make a difference where I live? Or how could I make a difference when I go to secondary school, and wider? And it will suddenly start to grow that way. Remember, courageous advocacy is more than just cake sales. It's more than just raising money. And actually, in these times of shortage of money, we need to be thinking of ways that we can encourage our children to have a voice and to give a voice to those that don't have it, without it always being about money. Could it be about writing letters? Could it be about an action? Could it be about doing something differently, or just a change in mindset? I wonder how your children might actually speak into the lives of their parents and then their grandparents and their wider community. So please don't feel pressured to have some big project or to be part of something massive. It's about how are you creating a culture of justice and advocacy for those that don't have that voice. So don't panic too much if you haven't got something set up, but actually do your children understand that they have got a place in the world to make a difference, and every small step does make a difference. Every light switch, every bit of rubbish picked up. How can they be part of that, and how, as you as a school, do you encourage that? We're going into part 2 now. This is more about actual inspection and when that phone call comes. But I know many of you have asked me for this. So this is just a little timeline that sets out how things work. Day 0, where that phone call comes, then what has to happen by the end of day 1, day 5, day 6, day 7, and day 14. Hopefully you can see that set out there clearly. So day 0, you get your phone call from the national team. You'll also engage with the inspector, and that is when the inspection process begins. And you will have quite a long conversation with that inspector, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. You will then be asked to send paperwork to support the inspector with their process. Then 48 hours, school hours before the inspection, you will receive your pre-inspection plan. And that sets out the lines of inquiry that the inspector is going to explore with you. 24 hours before the inspection, there'll be a phone call with yourself and the inspector just to check you're happy with the PIP and you're happy with arrangements and the timetable. Obviously, day 7 is inspection day, and then you should get the report by day 14, I think it is. But don't worry about that too much, that will be explained. But that is kind of the basis of the timeline for the inspection. This document is what you've got. This is in your SIAMS framework, and it sets out the context of the school, who are you and what are you doing here. Now these bullet points, there's lots of them there, are going to be the questions that the inspector will ask you on the phone. Now if your website's got lots of information, it might be that actually it's not as long a phone call. But it probably will be quite long because they really, really want to understand your context, your vision, and how they merge together with that theological rootedness. They are going to want to know practical things about governance, about trusts, if that's applicable, policy, practice, how we're going to formulate the timetable, and just your opportunity to tell your story and talk to the inspector about your school. So those things are all laid out for you. They're all there. And I would suggest that you make some notes against each one so that when you're asked those questions, you are ready. You will know the answers, but it's just good to have prompts so that you don't miss anything. So on inspection day, your job, your purpose is to give the inspector evidence and enough stuff, visits, opportunities to enable them to answer each of the IQ questions, the inspector questions. Really, this is your chance to show off. You get one day with one inspector, most of you, to really, really celebrate who you are as a school, all that you are about and all you are doing for your pupils in your community. So make sure you give them every opportunity to answer that IQ question. So I'm going to put some more wisdom here now for you and some things for you to consider really carefully. And these have come from inspections I've done recently and feedback I've had from other inspectors doing inspections in this sort of kind of southeast area. The first thing that I want you to consider is who speaks to the inspector. Now, I'm really not saying prime your children. If they've rehearsed, it will be so obvious. You know this. But what I am saying is think really carefully about the children that you put in front, and adults in front of the inspector. Remember, this is your chance to show your school for who it is. So choose the articulate children that love RE, for example, or those who for worship is really enjoyable. What I'm also not saying is exclude people. There should be a really rich range of ages, gender, levels of cognitive ability, children with SEND. Please give the inspector a really broad spectrum. But what I am saying to you is make sure when the children are in there, they are children that talk. Because if it's a room full of children that don't want to answer questions or give responses back to the inspector, it's going to be really difficult for the inspector to glean the information they need. So really think carefully about which children are really going to celebrate our school and show our vision in action. So remember, I'm not saying exclude anybody. Everybody is welcome. We are inclusive schools, give a really rich, diverse range of people, but make sure they are children, adults that speak and are willing to share of themselves with the inspector. I hope that makes sense. I hope you're getting the message of what I'm saying to you about here. Think really carefully about who you're going to put in front of the inspector. You will work with the inspector on the timetable. You know your school, you know how it works, you know where things are going to go best. But again, think really carefully about your timetable. Use every single minute. The inspector will say to you, I need a break then, I need some reflection time then, we'll do feedback about this time, but keep them busy. It's a long day and they are tired at the end of it, but keep them busy. What things could you do with the inspector to help them see your school as you want them to see it, to see the vision in action, to see your pupils at their best? Might it be that you want them to come out on the gate with you in the morning for 5 minutes? That gives us massive insight into how your community works. Keep them busy. Lots of children, lots of learning walks, lots of conversations with people so they can begin to triangulate your vision in action. Respect the inspector and what they want, because they will lay out some things they want to see. But feel free to add things in, tweak stuff, suggest things so that the inspector gets a really broad view of your school and all that you are about. Collective worship is a big part of the inspection, but remember it's about spiritual flourishing over time. It isn't about a one-off act of worship. But again, consider carefully what type of worship you want the inspector to join you for. It isn't about putting on a performance. It isn't about bringing all your best people in. But just think carefully, is a songs of praise worship going to show the inspector how you follow a pattern, how the children are given a chance to reflect and pray? Is the worship you've got planned going to enable children to be part of it, for example? Remember, you've got one day to show off your school. Choose something that is what you always do, because the children will tell the inspector if you're doing something different. But think about, how can I show the inspector how we flourish spiritually in worship through this act of worship? It doesn't need to be the head teacher, doesn't need to be the vicar, it could be pupil-led, it can be whatever it is. But just think really carefully about the act of worship, the structure of it, and who's part of it, to enable the inspector to answer the IQ question about collective worship. When you get your pre-inspection plan, it does set out the lines of inquiry that the inspector is going to want to explore. Think about who you might share that with. It does say you can share it with leaders and governors, and you might want to have a conversation with your teachers. This will just help all of you to understand where the inspector's going and to think carefully about what information, what things do we need to discuss, what things do we need to drop in, so that when we all have conversations with the inspector, we are helping them answer the IQ questions. It's not about priming, it's not about kind of rehearsing a set script, but it is about giving the inspector everything they need to answer that IQ question. So just think carefully, who might it be helpful to share this with to help support the inspection day? Paperwork. Now, the inspector will not have time to look through stacks and stacks of paperwork, particularly if you've planned a timetable that's really busy. However, it's likely they're going to ask to see governor minutes and maybe some policies and some data that needs to stay in school because it's confidential, so you don't send it via email. Make sure if they ask for it, you've got it ready, that you've got it to hand and it's ready for them to see. They will do their best to look at it. Please don't spend hours doing anything because there's not lots of time to look at it. Don't spend hours putting it in beautiful folders and things like that. Just have it printed out and ready. But if they ask for it, make sure you do it and make sure it's ready. I know it sounds a silly thing to say, but in the busyness, sometimes it can be forgotten. And particularly governor minutes are a really important piece of evidence. You will probably be asked this question, probably a couple of times. Is there anything else I need to know before I come into school? This is not an opportunity to share your deepest, darkest secrets or something that happened several years ago, but actually, if there has been a significant bereavement, if there has been a teacher off ill, poorly, or something like that that is deeply significant, that actually an inspector needs to be sensitive of when speaking to staff, please share it with them. You don't need to go into the details, but share it. If there's something major going on, like you're about to have your building knocked down and you're going to a new school building, or you're merging with the school across the road, or you're about to join a federation, and these things are happening imminently, just share it with the inspector. It's not necessarily going to be part of the evidence, but again, it helps them to understand your context. And particularly when talking to parents, if they've got anxieties or worries about something that's happening, if you don't know what they're talking about as an inspector, it's quite embarrassing. So just make sure you just drop into the conversation some significant pieces of information that might help the inspector know what they're walking into, but just to understand your broader context. So yeah, don't keep secrets, but think about what is relevant, what's important, and what might help the inspector know what's going on in your school and what's affecting you as leaders and your community. For those of you that haven't picked up on it, there has been an update to the judgments. They're still J1 and J2, but the wording has changed. So J1 now says, through its vision and practice, the school is living up to its foundation as a church school and is enabling pupils and adults to flourish. The biggest change comes to J2. The inspection findings indicate that the school has strengths, but there are also issues that leaders need to address as a matter of priority. These are listed in the areas for development. So J1 doesn't equal perfection, J2 does not equal fail. Okay, in J1 there are still going to be areas to continue working on, but they are going to be things that just need to be continued or embedded. A J2 is where there is something that has an urgent area of priority that needs to be addressed quickly, and that would be something that would give you a J2. Now, we've talked about that at length before on training, but I wanted to make sure that you've got the updated wording. When you receive your report, the front page will contain areas for development and areas of strength, and at the very bottom of the last page, it will indicate whether it's a J1 or J2. It is not going to be on the front page, and it is not going to be like the old good and excellent, you know, how did your what did you get for your inspection? It won't be that anymore. You won't say I got a J1 or I got a J2. It will be, how did your inspection go? What did they find, and what are you going to continue working on? So be really clear about that. So please don't worry about the judgments, but the wording's changed and it's laid out there for you. Thank you for joining us for this short video training. I hope it's been helpful, but as always, if you've got any questions or any queries, do get in touch and we will be here to help you. We will be in touch to arrange visits for you, and we'll sort that out into the new academic year. But please don't worry about any of these things, but I hope this has been helpful. Take care and see you soon.